Okay, we're on. Hi, good morning. My name's Ben. I'm German by name, but not by speech, as you may have realized. The accent is Australian, and I came over here for this conference, which is pretty fun. And today, my talk is called Vanity Performance Metrics, Looking Beyond the Numbers. Oh, firstly, before I get started, how's the party? Good fun? Is that why you're so quiet, or like you're a little bit dead on the inside at the moment? Yeah, okay. I'll be really nice to you. It's been a really great conference so far, and I'm really, pretty happy to be here as well. I always enjoy coming to Germany. I think I've been here 2 or 3 times a year in the last 4 years, so kind of a regular occurrence for me. Anyway, here we are. This is us. And right now on this beautiful blue huge marble, there are 7.4 billion of us. And every time I travel to the other side of the world to come for a conference, I think about how exciting and incredible and terrifying that it is that you can spend 13 hours in a compressed metal can, hurtling through the sky at 900 kilometers an hour, watching the latest and greatest in forgettable cinema, non-stop advertisements for watches and perfumes. Who buys those at that time anyway? I don't know. And thinking about the people and the places that you'll meet on the other side. It's really easy to forget all of that you're able to circumnavigate the entire globe in just one day. Of course, when you compare that to the internet, it's kind of lame. I can send a packet or dozens of packets from one side of the planet to the other in less than half a second. So speaking of timing, for the last 30 years, there's been a quest to reduce the latency between an interesting situation, and that is the stock exchange in New York and Chicago. And these stock exchanges have gone through several iterations of connectivity between those two locations, basically aimed to to try to reduce the latency between when they're putting in stock, when they're putting in trades. So if your trade goes in first at the exact time when you've measured that it should go in, you'll get a better price and you'll beat everyone else to actually owning that. Every millisecond makes the difference. Looking at it, starting over in the 1980s, the round-trip latency from New York to Chicago via a dedicated link, fiber link, was 14.5 milliseconds. And in 2010, that was able to be cut to 13.1. But in 2012, people started inventing, well, not inventing, but trialing new ways of actually having those two locations connected. And what actually happened was people started to use microwave links. And you'll see kind of in the photo here, that tower, which is placed in a farm kind of in the middle of nowhere. And these towers, this particular one, the plot of land was sold for $500 million just to have this tower there. And the reason for that is that the microwave links, which are placed all the way along, it's not just one tower, it's a tower every at least 100 kilometers, because any shorter and they would lose performance essentially, or maybe lose connectivity altogether for transmission. But by doing that, they were able to get the speed right down to 4.2 to kind of 5.2 milliseconds, which if you compare to the speed of light, is probably about as good as we're going to get for connectivity. And of course, when there's lots of money involved, these kind of things can kind of magically happen. Back in the real world, we're really, really great at sending packets from one side of the globe to the other. Every single second of the day, we're tweeting 7,200 times, and we're doing 54,000 Google searches. I believe there's also about 2.5 million emails per second. Of course, email is, I think, about 70% spam entirely, so it's much less of an important number. But it gets interesting when you think about all of those numbers, 52,000 Google searches, is actually conducted by half of the world, or less than half of the world. 43% of the world has access to the internet, and 57% do not. So if we're less than kind of half of the population are online now, where are we at and how quickly will it grow? And the answer to that question isn't so much of how, it's where. And the answer to that is probably India. In 2016 alone, more people from India will gain access to the internet than the entire population of Germany. So the population in India is 1.2 billion people. In Germany, it's 88 million. Yeah, there's going to be 100 million new people online just this year. Airtel, which is India's largest mobile phone carrier, has 250 million customers. So they're just people who have a mobile phone and they have an account. Doesn't mean that they have data necessarily, but they definitely have access to something. But they only have 32% market share of all of India. So they're the biggest carrier, and they have almost the population of the United States, but it's only 32%. And maybe even more interestingly is that only 65% of the 1.2 billion people in India have access to the internet today. What's happening in India at the moment is that people are buying phones. It's their primary method of connecting to the internet. So these are people who have never owned a computer, and they're getting online for the very first time today, tomorrow, using a phone. How many people used a phone as their first internet connectivity ever? One person? Wow, that's really impressive. I remember my first internet was in high school. I was 17, and I went to the library, and I was able to use the internet, and I remember images taking literally minutes to load because my entire school had one small connection, and it was shared amongst all the computers. We've kind of come a long way from there. But to give a little bit of extra insight to the way that India and other countries that are developing are growing, I took the minimum wage and calculated how many hours that they would have to work to be able to buy 500 megs of data. And this is just a cellular connection. It could be any one of the carriers. You might be able to get a little bit cheaper. You may be able to do a little bit better. I don't know. But basically, the data is here. So in Germany, to get 500 megabytes of data on a mobile plan, you would have to work less than an hour. I think it was about 38 minutes, based on the minimum wage, which is new here. And in India, topped it out at 17 hours for 500 megs. I'll let you take your little photos. Very good. All right. So that basically equates to 1 hour of work for 8 songs on Spotify, or 6 minutes of YouTube, or less than an hour playing an online game. And what's really, really interesting and fitting is that I kept a little record of the amount of internet that I used to just do this slide deck and just to prepare for this talk. This was all stuff that I knew, and it was all stuff that I care about deeply, but to just reference lots of stats and watch videos of other presentations, see what people were talking about, I went through this much data. So in India, at minimum wage, this would equate to about 3 weeks' worth of work of data. And that may sound very privileged for me to be able to say that, but the connections that I used were everything. I used my cable internet at my office, which is somewhere between 70 and 115 Mbps. I live on the wrong side of the street, so to speak, where on one side of the street where I live, you can get cable, which would be the same speed, and on my side of the street, I get DSL. So if I'm lucky, I'll get 16 meg, and it's pretty spotty. On my way over here, I was able to have Wi-Fi on the plane for, 20 hours of flying. I had a dedicated link, and I was surfing the web. I've actually experienced people on flights next to me FaceTiming people for like an hour, which is really, really strange, but it can happen. And again, I was tethering using my iPhone. And I've put the scale here as 0 to 120 Mbps. So as you know, as soon as you go into a tunnel on a train, you don't have any internet anymore. Your phone thinks you have internet, but you don't. And then hotel Wi-Fi, which is probably the most expensive resource on the planet, giving a generous 500 megabytes per day at a stunning 1 Mbps. Actually, last night I capped out my hotel internet within 15 or 20 minutes, and I don't know how that happened. So there you go. So as I was saying, even if you've bought 500 megabytes of data, even if you've worked those 17 hours to be able to go and do that and get online, you might think that 4G is available wherever you are, but you can't really assume that it's going to be that. In fact, of all connections over the globe, mobile connections, 60% of them are actually at 2G speeds. So while here in Germany and back in Australia, we definitely have 4G available, kind of, in the cities, it's definitely not guaranteed. Last year, I believe in June 2015, Facebook released Facebook Lite for Android. Has anyone seen this before? Two folks? Yeah. So what was really interesting about this was it was 1 megabyte to download. But not only was it 1 megabyte to download, it was really important that the size of the app was quite small as well. So it was actually 1 megabyte of total footprint. So once you have downloaded it onto your phone, you could actually store it. You didn't have to delete important photos or videos or other content that you're actually trying to keep just to see what your friend ate for breakfast. And yeah, within a year, it's got an active monthly user account of 100 million people. Not too shabby. They use also a custom message protocol over TCP, so they're not using like a standard HTTP protocol that we would maybe be used to on the web. They built something and basically just tried to shrink every byte down, or down to the last byte. Images inside the app are actually reformatted and rescaled using a CDN on the fly. And so they've done quite a lot to make this experience really, really work very great. But what's really great about the web is that we don't have to install things. And with Google's latest efforts with the web app manifests and the progressive web app movement, it's not just Google, but they're kind of leading the charge there. It's possible to have the entirety of your whole site or your whole app stored on a device for next time, placed on a home screen like an app. And I'm not certain that it's ever really been about web versus mobile. It wasn't versus anything except web developers believing that ignoring half the population of the planet was the right thing to do. So I'd like to introduce to you the two versions of the internet as I see them. There's the one that we imagine, which is the cable, the fiber, the large corporate, the university. This is your best case internet. This is the internet that people from Silicon Valley believe it exists. And then there's the one that we don't really believe exists. And it's airplanes, hotels, coffee shop Wi-Fi, when you go into a tunnel, when you go to a conference. And what Jake Archibald has coined is Li-Fi, where Li-Fi is where your phone believes you have a connection and it will keep trying to hit the site that you've hit, and you keep hitting reload and you're sure that it will load the next time, but it doesn't, and then your battery drains and then you're late and you can't meet your friends and your phone's dead and you complain the whole time because you couldn't meet them in the place where you're supposed to. It's pretty horrible. So it can happen at any time. Devices, connections, language, context, and abilities are different for everyone, and it doesn't matter where you are in the world. You'll know yourself that if it's a thick wall, it can mess up the Wi-Fi, or a tunnel, or a dead patch. Inconsistency is a major property of the web, and it's something that we have to embrace. But right now, we're in the understanding that the global landscape of the internet is nothing like that. So we have to start thinking of strategies to better build our apps and sites. The way that we can do that is we can gather some knowledge, and we can just start to build with empathy and understanding. A few years ago, Ethan Marcotte coined responsive web design, and for a few years we've started talking about the idea of mobile first. But I'd like to put it to you that mobile is actually the majority. Mobile has overtaken desktop in the last few years, and we're seeing about 50%, or 53%, I believe, of devices on the internet are now mobiles. And as we've shown with the growth in India, that's about to get a lot more real. So how about we forget, even just maybe for a few minutes, that the next opportunity to take an app to a vertical market, and maybe we can start thinking about an entire civilization that we're ignoring. Here's the truth. Users today will understand what a mobile-friendly site is. Moreover, they'll start to get a handle on when a site is sucking up their data, their battery, or both. And you'll bet that people will purposely avoid your site if that's their main takeaway. It's wasting their precious resources, and sometimes faster than it can actually work to replace them. One of the problems being is that the metrics that we're using to talk about performance right now actually tell us nothing about users. This little section I like to call metrics that don't even. Up until now, we've used two basic metrics when we talk about web performance. The first is DOM content loaded, which maybe you will know as DOMReady. And this is the point in the time when the browser has created a live in-memory representation of the markup that was downloaded, parsed, and deciphered. And it's the point where you'll be able to query for elements and add events and actually be able to make the user be able to interact in a more interesting way. onLoad is the point when the browser has read ahead in the markup, found all of the images, the scripts, and the style sheets, started to download them, and it will schedule them ahead of time. It has a read ahead of time parser. And it's the point where every one of those resources all loads together. But again, it doesn't tell us anything about what the user actually experienced. They're useful if you want to track the change in your site in the same perfect magical environment, but they don't tell us anything beyond that. So what is a good metric? A good metric can't be gamed. So when I say gamed, I mean taking the onLoad as an example, we can do a few things to make onLoad happen faster, right? As soon as we AJAX content in, we're pulling it out of that onLoad timer. So if you wanted to be able to say, oh yeah, I changed the onLoad for my site from 7 seconds to 4, you could probably just AJAX the lower page part of the content. But that's kind of cheating it. It doesn't actually really improve anything for the user unless you're really thinking about above the fold painting. And the other thing that I think is really important for performance in general is that we can't use metrics that are at risk of failure. So it's very good if you can have the latest and greatest mobile phone or a $3,000 MacBook at your disposal, and you've got a perfect connection on fiber. If you're blocking the main thread in JavaScript, low-powered devices are bound to slow down. Scrolling will be bad. You'll see when you scroll, the page will jump up and down. We'll have resizing events when images load into the page, and it's really disconcerting to the user. That's what a failure, in my mind, is of a metric. What a good metric is something that gives us an idea of what a user actually feels. So here are 3 things that I think are probably the most interesting or kind of important metrics that we have at the moment. The first being first paint. Has anyone come across this at all? So this is the time when you've sent all your markup, you've sent all your scripts to the browser, and the browser has that moment where it goes from white to something. And that something might be just some colored boxes, and in a lot of cases it'll be before the web fonts have loaded, or the web fonts do load and then they change, which is the worst thing ever. It's a point in the time when the user is being visually signaled that something is happening, something's about to happen, the page is going to be ready. And it does indicate that, or the indication is that if you can lower that time and get somebody something, they'll interact with your site more. I like to think of this as the waiter at a restaurant giving you a glass of water. So if the kitchen is really backed up and it's maybe going to be a bit slow, the waiter will come over and chat to you and then ask you if you'd like a drink. And then they'll make the drink take 10 minutes, and then they'll come to you and they'll say, that's going to be the best drink you've ever had in your life. We'll be right back with your food in 40 minutes. So this is the web's version of that. The second, and I think this is the most important metric, is visual completeness. The Google Chrome team would call this speed index. And the way that this is calculated is you'll record a video of a site, and you'll take a screenshot every 100 milliseconds from beginning to the end, and you'll compare every one of those little thumbnails against the point where the site looks the most complete in terms of like the last frame. Speed index is a little bit of a difficult measure, so I like to just have the time to visual completeness, because it gives us an idea of when the user actually believes the page is ready to be interacted with. And then the third thing is timed user interactions. And to be able to do timed user interactions, we need to actually monitor users in real time. In the case of someone like Twitter, a timed user interaction may be the time to first tweet, or it may be the time that it took them to log in. These are really important metrics because it tells us how people are actually using the site. If we make a whole bunch of performance changes that are either negative or positive, we can use these events to go and track if users are actually doing what we want them to do. In the case of e-commerce, it's buying a product, right? Or it's maybe looking at more photos of a product to decide before they actually buy it. So this will actually, using that as a metric and working with your business is the way that you can actually justify doing performance work, which we believe to be really important, but there is a little bit of a gap between how much money you're going to be better off if you actually have a really performant site. And so you might be thinking right now, well, hey, look, that's really interesting, but my company is focused, maybe like this, my company is focused on German-born passport holders that were singing the German national anthem last night when Germany won against Italy in the Euro Cup. But what I think is really important to remember is that connectivity can never be guaranteed. And to be honest, it really reminds me of this comic, at a climate change summit, where all the leaders were brought together. So what if it's a big hoax and we create a better world for nothing? Actually, as a little aside, maybe you haven't noticed, but I've got a favorite thing about this comic, and it's this lady who has her head completely turned around backwards. It's pretty great. So at the moment, we're so heavily focused on the wealthy Western web. But I think what we all signed up to do was actually work on the World Wide Web. So let's try and deliver that promise of creating a truly global experience for everyone. If you're interested in following the work that I do beyond today, I run a twice-monthly newsletter about all things that are performance and user interaction and experience. And I also run a web performance analytics company called Callebaut. And I'm really excited to tell you that what I've been working on for, I think, maybe the whole year, is creating a tool that allows you, or an extra part of Callebaut that allows you to track users in real time, getting insights to what they do, how often they do it, and the way that your site performs for them. So you take that and you add the ability to filter by browser type or location or even the company that they work for, and I think you've got something pretty special. I'm working with some people to be able to do this for React components as well as just your regular single-page app. It's hitting beta next month, but for now I've got some stickers with me if you want to come and say hi during the break. I'd like to leave you with this short video which is featuring Steve Jobs in 1990, and it's about how he liked to contextualize how computers augment everyday life. Hopefully after today, you can all reconsider your role as a builder for the web and the enablement that you'll be able to bring to literally billions of people in the future.
And I read a study that measured the efficiency of locomotion for various species on the planet. The condor used the least energy to move a kilometer. And humans came in with a rather unimpressive showing about a third of the way down the list. It was not too proud of a showing for the crown of creation. So that didn't look so good, but then somebody at Scientific American had the insight to test the efficiency of locomotion for a man on a bicycle. And a man on a bicycle, or a human on a bicycle, blew the condor away, completely off the top of the charts. And that's what a computer is to me. What a computer is to me is, it's the most remarkable tool that we've ever come up with. And it's the equivalent of a bicycle for our minds.
Computer is the equivalent of a bicycle for our minds. And I think if we can put that in the hands of everyone on the planet, we'll have a pretty interesting place. I've been Ben Schwarz. Thanks for having me. Good morning, and congratulations.